Cool.
The new thing I'm trying is not using headphones. Riverside told me it could echo cancel, so let me know how that pans out.
Yeah, sounds good. Oh, that's another thing that's different. Your audio sounds much clearer. I think the headset you have compresses it. It's clear. You can understand what you're saying. It's high signal, but it sounds crunched in the same way that a phone call sounds crunched.
Interesting, because I normally get a lot of compliments on the audio through the headphone.
It's very clear, and the range of audio is more compressed. It doesn't sound like a phone call, but it sounds in the direction of a phone call. I think
Okay.
That type of compression just looks like taking off the high and the low frequencies or something. So I feel like I'm hearing more of the frequencies of your voice.
And do you like what you hear?
Oh, I love it.
Tell me,
give me
what
more.
are the high and low frequencies of my voice like?
give me more of these frequencies. I've been thinking a lot more about this for YouTube video content of little tiny tweaks and things in production value seem to be very high probability choices of amplifying your content. I think with audio in particular, I just dropped, I think like $250 on this very fancy Rode microphone because I think this is an area of my life where I can spend money to leverage the work that I'm doing. And I feel like in my life, those opportunities are far and few between. I'm still trying to figure out how to hire people. That's a thing I'd love to talk with you about. How do you think about hiring people? Do you have a personal assistant? Do you outsource development work? What's your process with that?
Yeah, so it's depended on where I've been and what I've been doing. I've been in situations hiring several people, building up teams of full-time employees, and I've been in situations of just having contractors here and there. It varies. I think one thing that I have found is that it depends on what it is. The full-time employee thing, like, you have to really need them. Like, it's, it works well when there is something that you are not good at doing, or it would not be in your interest to be doing, and you can find somebody who is much better at that thing than you, then that can make a great hire. In terms of the kind of day-to-day, the personal assistant, the VA, even really it's the same conversation as like cleaner and other things like that. People who help around the house, people who help any of those things. I think it's what you said at the start. It's if there are other things that it makes more sense for you to lose a little bit of money than lose a little bit of time, given that perhaps you're in a position where you have more money than time for certain situations. What specific things are you thinking?
Anything. I am struggling and have been struggling for the last year to find ways to pay people to save my own time.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you a recent example. As part of this YouTuber course, they're talking about the process of outsourcing editing. It's a very easy win because you can get a video edited for $30 to $80 outsourcing it. And so if your time is worth more than that, then outsource, and then you can spend more time making videos and writing scripts and things and be much more effective. And so I was initially very excited about that, thinking, okay, well, I've sort of systematized my process of editing these videos that are going out on my podcast and on the chats that I'm having with Shai that I still don't know what I'm going to do with, but I'm editing them just for fun. And the process looked like, okay, I have these two video feeds. I sync them up, and then person A is talking. I switch to person A. Now they're both talking in a transition period. I switch to an angle of both of them. Now only person B is talking. I switch to person B. And I had in my head like, oh man, this is so exciting. This is what a great opportunity to hire someone because I have this great defined process, and I'll just record a quick Loom video for them showing them how I do this. But then I thought, this is a very defined process. This is something I feel like I could write a program to make. And there's some unknowns of, okay, well, how do you get the audio levels for a video at a certain frame? But those types of problems are fascinating for me, and I love solving them. And in 2 hours and change, I wrote a program that will perfectly edit these videos indefinitely in the future, exactly the way I want them, forever, for a few pennies of electricity. Mm-hmm. And I feel like if I was tuned a little bit more towards, let's hire a person to solve this problem, I wouldn't have gotten to the point where the task was so clearly defined that I could have made it in code. And so I sort of see that process as very valuable. I don't know that there is a problem of how I currently have tuned when I outsource things. And so far, I feel like I have not been able to find a task that could not be broken down so far that I could outsource it to a computer that made sense for a human. I think the single example that I have, I guess I have two. I hired an accountant, and the accountant makes sense because that's just a whole thing that I don't want to deal with. And at the same time, I feel like if I opened that puzzle, I would have a much better product that was much better outsourced. Like I would just write a program to generate the forms that I need to generate, and it would be much cheaper, and it would do it much better.
Exactly the place that I came to. So I totally hear where you're coming from.
Oh, you got to that place. You do your own accounting,
but with the accounting, or bookkeeping, but not with certain other things. So I understand what you're saying. Part of it is we have a very unfair advantage. We have the superpower of being able to build the staff to do something for us. So when you say kind of, it was only when you broke it into parts, broke it down into a process in order to give it to a person that you realized you could write code for it. You've possibly also had situations where you've thought from the beginning, I could write code for this, and so I need to break it down into a process. And so you're right. That's kind of the, if there's something that you feel that you shouldn't be spending your time on, then your options are delegate, automate, or eliminate. And for somebody who can program, there will be a lot of situations where automate makes more sense than delegate. I think the situations where delegate still makes sense is where there's some human talent still required, which invariably means that it involves vision. That's one of the core differences I notice, is as soon as the task needs to involve creativity is the other one. You might hire somebody, if you want somebody to think of novel solutions, then you might do better with a person than a robot. Well, that will, robots will get better at pretending they're creative over time. Vision is the other kind of related thing that computers are just not nearly as good at or easy to get to be good at as humans. So there are things that computers are bad at compared to people, and we know that. But for something like you just said, if it's systemized down to the level of switch from this stream to that stream, it doesn't need creativity, it doesn't need vision, and you're able to program. And so, and you probably enjoyed the process of building the program more than you maybe would have enjoyed finding a person to do it.
Yep.
Which is the other big thing it comes down to is one thing I think is important in these kind of discussions is it's all well and good that you can break down something and say, my time would be better. This is wasting my time, and so I need to get rid of it from what I spend my time on. And one thing that's worth doing is also questioning that assumption. why, if is it true that that thing is a waste of your time? If, for example, you really enjoy, like, so if you really loved editing those videos and you enjoyed getting better at editing it and you wanted to learn, and over time you would then play around with the editing app and you would find new things and you would develop your skills and you were enjoying that game, then maybe it's not a waste of time at all. There are certain, I'm sure if I thought for a little while, I can come up with lots of examples of things that somebody else might decide, things that I do with my time that somebody else would say that should definitely be automated or delegated away, particularly delegated. And the answer is yes, I can see how somebody might want to delegate that and it would save them some time. But of all the hours that I have in the week, I can choose what to spend them on. And actually, if that's one of my favorite things to spend those hours on, then the fact that other people would say that's a task ripe for delegation doesn't mean you have to delegate it. You have to be aware, like it's always a trade-off. If you spend your time on that, you can't spend that time on something else. But you get to choose what you spend your time on in the first place. And if you want to spend it on that thing that someone else would delegate, then you choose to do that.
There's 2 points you made there that I'd love to jump off on. I'll start with the simpler one. I love the framing of it may not be a waste of my time if I'm enjoying the process of editing. What else am I going to spend my time on? Watching TikTok compilations on YouTube? If I'm enjoying that time and at the same time sort of practicing ironing out the workflow of these are the things that needs to happen and experimenting with new things and all the while going through the process with this superpower of I can infinitely automate any piece of this if I can define it clearly enough. Maybe I'm just okay with that. And yeah, there's
otherwise you spend your whole life automating and delegating away everything so that you have all the free time to what? Like you've delegated out. I've automated or delegated like all the way down to the level of seeing family and friends. I've got a robot to do that for me so that I can and everyone would look at that and say, well, that's a flawed argument because obviously you get rid of everything else so that you can, and then they typically say the one thing that they think is the most important. But I'm not sure it's that simple. Like I say, you can draw your line anywhere. You can I think it touches back to what we've been talking about in the past about whether the things that you're doing are a means to an end or whether you can enjoy them for what they are in themselves. Because otherwise everything in your life can end up being a means to, like, it's just something you're trying to rush through to get to the next thing. At some point you've got to say, actually, no, doing that constitutes part of my life in itself, and that might be my favorite way to spend my time.
I like that idea. Don't automate absolutely everything, or you're conflating the end for the means, and you're not enjoying the process as you're going along. I'm reminded by there's a Zen quote along the lines of before you reach enlightenment, you spend time harvesting rice, and you work in the fields, and you go get water, and then after you reach enlightenment, you do the exact same things. You're just enlightened about it, and you're able to enjoy it fully and be calm and present, which is such a powerful idea. I think people get obsessed with these high-octane sports of I really enjoy rock climbing and things like racing and flying and things where it's very intense and very requires all of your attention. And the explanation that I get from people of why they enjoy those things is that they feel like they're fully present. They feel like they're in the moment and they don't have the capacity to think about anything else because they're just totally there. If you let your mind wander for a second, your hand could slip off the rock and you could fall. And if you're practicing mindfulness, you can find that same joy in moments where you're driving to the grocery store or talking to a friend. If you could live your life in that heightened state of presence entirely, it would be as if you were living a life where you got to race cars every minute of your waking day. That's a fun idea.
We're going to have to pause here so that I can find a quote from a book that is just so apt to what you just said that I don't even want to retrieve it later. And using your editing prowess, I'm sure you can edit out this brief pause while I go and look for it.
My automated editor is actually not currently capable of editing out brief pauses, but that's a... I don't know how I would do that. I guess I would mark it while I was editing, and then I would just have it notice the marks. Oh, another annoying thing.
Or check the audio, presumably.
Yes.
Heuristic for what a period of silence sounds like.
If it's completely silent, but like we're still talking in this moment, I'll just leave it at
then this part still has value. I meant if it went completely silent for a minute, then you're right, it wouldn't be completely silent, but you'd have some kind of heuristic, some kind of definition of what counts as something that a human would consider to be silent.
Right. Yeah, that's a really good idea. I do like the idea of just editing out silence, and that would be easy. So if there was a part that I wanted to just completely edit out, I could mute myself or something or just stop talking. Yeah, that's a good idea. I'll add that to my feature queue. The key to the spiritual dimension in life.
I should have cropped out the heading so I didn't put you off. Just read the paragraphs.
Oh, it's fine. I don't think I'm put off. I like the glyph on top. That's pretty. In life-threatening emergency situations, the shift in consciousness from time to presence sometimes happens naturally. The personality that has a past and a future momentarily recedes and is replaced by an intense conscious presence. Very still, but very alert at the same time. Whatever response is needed then arises out of that state of consciousness. The reason why some people love to engage in dangerous activities, oh my gosh, such as mountain climbing, car racing, and so on. Wow, did I read this book and forget about it? Although they may not be aware of it, is that it forces them into the now, that intensely alive state that is free of time, free of problems, free of thinking, free of burden of personality. Slipping away from the present moment, even for a second, may mean death. Unfortunately, they come to depend on a particular activity to be in that state, yep. But you don't need to climb the north face of the Eiger. You can enter that state now. I think, having read this, I probably got that idea from someone who read this book. I vaguely remember a blog post that I read.
And I think I know who. I recommended the book to Moitza.
Yes.
And she is the one that took that photo and I think put it on social media.
Yes. I bet I just read her tweet about it. Oh, that's so funny. We've come full circle. Small aside, I've been investing a lot of time and attention, especially in automation, in the problem of content knowledge management, of being able to take better notes and being able to trace back, okay, where did I get this idea from and source that back?
Yes, totally.
Oh my gosh, it's incredibly powerful. It's my system right now is still in its baby phases, but I'm opening up the potential so that while I was talking about that, I could have tagged my note with rock climbing and mindfulness, and that would have pulled up the source of the information when I first talked about that, and also every other time that I've mentioned those two concepts together or in isolation. And it feels very much like building a second brain, to steal a phrase from Diego Forte.
Yeah, I mean, I've looked into some of the second brain things, and I'm just not convinced yet. I'm keeping an eye on it because I think I very much appreciate the problem. I just don't buy into the solutions yet.
I've tried all of the solutions, and I agree with you, and that's why I'm building my own.
Cool.
Yeah,
keep me posted.
I will. You mentioned the futility of continuing to automate so that you could do what? So that you could lay on a beach, or I think your example was spend time with family.
Well, yeah, I mean, you would, but then you automate that away, and then
just have a robot going out on the beach for you. Yeah.
I'm reminded of the Matrix, like the people in the pods, like everyone just attached to a machine. I feel like you're just like it would be like volunteering to just automate everything away so that you can just live in a pod.
Sure.
Like at some point you've gone too far, and yeah, I think where I don't agree with the delegate everything, automate everything is you're doing it in search of efficiency. I think that's how I'd sum up what we were saying before. It's the idea of anything that's taking up my time is inefficient, and inefficient is bad. And I think that is can become very, very close to not being in the moment whatsoever. I think there's often a lot of parallels between those two things.
I completely agree.
Running.
If you're automating for merely the sake of making it more efficient, if you're making more paper clips, not for any grander vision of what you want the world to be, but just because it's a game and you can automate it. I've seen a lot of people fall into that trap with money. They get good at the game of making more money, and they never really question why they're doing it, but they're playing this game, and so it's very straightforward what the next step is, and they just keep making more money. And I think the way to solve that is have a bigger purpose. If you have a goal that you're driving towards, well, okay, great. Then sort of definitionally, and it's a good goal. It's a moral goal. It's a goal in line with the things that you want in the world and the way that you want the world to be different. Efficiency in that context means you are getting more of the thing that is good. So if you're efficiently going towards good, then efficiency is good. And so I agree that efficiency in itself is sort of meaningless, but if you have it directed towards a goal, that's how you imbue efficiency with meaning.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And so it depends what that goal is. And as you know from things we talked about before, there's my theories about the inner goal and the outer goal. The kind of you have your goal for your businesses and that kind of thing, and then there's the goal of just being present in whatever you are doing. Which, at which point I think for me, so the bookkeeping is a good example. A lot of people delegate that away immediately because they don't know how to do it and they don't want to know how to do it and they don't like it and it seems horrible and all the rest of it. I happen to find it quite interesting. And so while I could absolutely delegate it, I find it interesting enough, and it doesn't take so much of my time that I have enjoyed the process of learning more about it and doing it myself. I think it's not uncommon to see people do that with, let's say, car repairs. Most people would take their car to a mechanic. But if you find that you actually really enjoy learning how to repair cars, and that becomes a hobby for you, then delegating fixing your car would be a terrible idea. You just delegated away having one of your hobbies. It's like the equivalent of, it is totally inefficient for me to learn to play the piano because I could pay someone to play for me, or I could purchase a recording, and totally missing the fact that sometimes the act of doing it yourself is where the enjoyment is.
What a great example of working on your car. I have a salient example of that. I was looking at, I needed a car because it was looking like I was going to be living in Dallas, Texas for an extended period of time, and you cannot survive here without a car. I don't like having a car. I don't enjoy driving. In times when I've lived in a city that has good public transportation, I strongly prefer that. So in opening up this problem of, okay, I need a car. What car do I get? I was initially very drawn to Teslas because how cool is it that there's a car that's just a computer with a motor and wheels? And I feel like what attracted me to that was that I understand all the pieces of this car. And I have a brother-in-law who's very into cars. I'm so happy to finally have a car guy in my life. And he was selling a car that he had gotten at a car auction for peanuts and told me, I'd love to sell you this car. It just has this one little thing about it that needs to be replaced. And I saw this as a great opportunity for, I'd love to help you repair the car. And I could learn about the car in the process. And then, it's not a Tesla, but it's a cool car. And in the process of doing it, but because of his understanding of cars, he was encapsulating a lot of complexity in the statement, it just needs one thing replaced. We ended up taking the entire engine apart. It was just sprawled out across his garage floor. It was amazing. I've never undone more bolts in my entire life. And in the process of doing that, oh my gosh, it was captivating the entire time. I felt fully present and just absorbed in the system and was making all these analogies and connections to, it's just like software. And the process of him teaching me is helping me better understand how I teach other people. And his domain of expertise in cars, the way that I'm looking at him with his domain expertise in cars and hearing him explain things, whoa, that's probably how people feel when I'm talking about computers, because that's my domain expertise. And so, anytime I didn't understand something or that I was making a mistake and felt anxious, it was a positive experience for me because, I'm learning how to be a better teacher for other people. And so that was over the summer. And then I got this confidence of, oh my gosh, I understand cars now. And I know what all the pieces in the engine are. I have this loose skill set now that I feel like I can do any arbitrary thing I want to with a car. And so I started notebooking all these ideas of, okay, what do I like about Teslas? I love the automatic locks that when you walk up, the car just notices that your phone is nearby and unlocks the car. Okay, well, I've taken the car apart. I know what all the pieces are. I could do that just by putting a little solenoid in the door and moving it up and down. And then I know how Arduinos work. I can just have a little Bluetooth sensor there. So now we're getting to my point. That
you're going to build your next car.
Well, I sort of built this car. That project became stalled. I designed it all and was very excited about it and ordered all the parts for it. And I got stuck on a step in the project that I was just not excited about, which was you had to get underneath the car and run this wire from the battery down through the cab, and a bunch of other wiring problems that are very straightforward. But I don't have a robot that I can tell okay, run this wire this way yet. So yesterday I drove to Pat's house, my brother-in-law, and was like, hey, I would love to just hire you to run these wires, and here's the diagram. And it was great. And he enjoyed it because that's work that he enjoys doing, and he got to learn more about the car. I feel like I understood enough of the process, and I had designed the system and I had the vision for what I wanted to happen, that I didn't feel robbed of the experience of running the wires. So that's one of the few examples of where I feel like outsourcing made perfect sense. It was a straightforward task that needed a little bit of ingenuity and a little bit of knowledge work of knowing how to run the wires and how to get underneath the car, that I could have done and didn't want to, which is not to say that I couldn't have fully enjoyed and embraced the experience of doing it, but I think it made more sense to outsource it.
Yeah. And I think that makes a great point. There's always trade-offs. But I don't think there's ever a blanket right or wrong in the question of, is this something that I should do myself, or is it something that I should abstract away to a person or a machine? It's, like you said there are trade-offs, and there might be some parts where you say this part is interesting and the interest level for me, or the learning experience or whatever is high. It's a cost benefit thing. This would be more interesting to me than the time it's going to take. And then there's a part of the project where those two things are in the opposite order, where you say, I don't think I'd enjoy that part of that much, and actually it would take me quite a long time. And so now the cost benefit swings the other way, and so I'm going to go and ask someone to do it. One of the variables, by the way, in deciding the cost is how readily accessible the alternative is. So the fact that you had your brother-in-law around the corner and you knew that he could do it means that the cost associated with the outsourcing was lower than if you had no idea who, and you'd have to spend some energy finding some mechanics in the area and deciding whether you trust them, and all of those things. So there's always this kind of cost benefit both directions, and that one project for you had elements of both.
I think that's a good framing of this, and I think tuning when in my life it makes sense, when the benefit is higher than the costs, and also just rigorously working on reducing the costs is a good way forward.
Sometimes there's a middle ground as well, where you kind of say, you know what, I'm going to learn enough about how cars work so that I feel confident when I take it to the mechanic that I'm not being screwed over. I'm not interested in exactly how to do the things, but I just want enough baseline knowledge that I am able to at least evaluate whether the person I'm outsourcing to is doing a good job, and so on. So you're spending a little bit of time in order to reduce the cost of the outsourcing process.
I like that. And talking through this, I think it makes perfect sense for me to open up accounting as a thing to do, because I hate the entire process of that right now. And I have to interact with QuickBooks, and QuickBooks is just one of the worst pieces of software I've ever come across. And I feel like if I sunk, 8 hours into this, I could have a system that I loved, that I was spending less time and money on than I currently am with my
system. So that's where I got to, but with I use Free Agent instead of QuickBooks, and it is very good. I like it. It's probably one of my highest NPS score softwares that I use. Having said that, it was built in the UK, and so it has one click for a lot of UK things. I know that they have a US version, but I don't know if it's as feature complete in terms of what needs to happen in the US.
Cool.
So worth you looking at if you haven't already, because it is good software. But I don't know whether it will solve all the problems you're looking for.
Cool.
Like it would if you were here.
I'll check it out. That's a good place to start.
I can even give you a referral link.
Ooh, I'll take it.
So that was one where I kind of said, this isn't worth it. There is some existing software that is very good. I'm not gonna outsource this to a person. I'm gonna get proficient enough that I feel confident outsourcing it to the software, and there is some third-party software that is great enough that it's worth me spending the money for that subscription than to build something myself and maintain it. My father thought I was mad to be spending whatever it is, £20-30 a month on that, when you could just build that yourself. But again, there are trade-offs.
I think inevitably my process with things like that are that I use the best tools I can find and then catalog all the different ways that I'm frustrated with that tool. And then once I've built up those gripes and feature requests to a critical point, okay, well, now I have a much more clear idea of the thing that I would want to build. And then I can just knock it out in a day or two. And I know exactly what the inputs and outputs are and what the minimum product is that I would need to do it. So if I was going to predict for my future self how I'm going to do this, I'm probably going to switch to Free Agent or something like that, and then get really annoyed with some step in the process of Free Agent and start planning my own thing. And then at some manic sprint of development in the next 2 years, I'll make my own thing that, slurps up my...
I've had very few gripes, so I've never even got close to the place of saying I'm going to replace this.
I have such a low tolerance for any form of frustration. If there's a thing that takes 2 clicks and I think it should happen in 1 click, that's enough for me.
Okay, fair enough. But there's also an interesting thing around that is as when I say that I haven't had any gripes and so I've not built my own, I have had gripes with it where I've built something that plugs in. So, for example, I think you can now. It's still inferior. Okay, yeah. So you couldn't connect TransferWise with Free Agent. you had to log into TransferWise and export and then modify. I think I had to make some changes to the file that it exported before I was able to import it into Reeagent, and I had to do that manually. And so I ended up building just something that connected the two APIs together. They have now released official support for that, but it's still inferior, and I still use my automated script. But at no point did I say I'm going to throw away Reeagent. I just said I can build something to plug that deficiency.
I love that, and I've followed a similar process. Things like for my note-taking application, that's this Second Brain. I started off just using Roam and using their tools, and then when I got frustrated enough with that, I moved to Sublime as an editor, but then built my own little connecting scripts to like log to cite articles and things. And yeah, it's like a piecewise way of building it that you don't have to fully replace something if you can just insert something between the input and output of any of the stages of that process. Yeah, I love that method. You mentioned, pulling back one more time to the idea of what do you do after you've automated everything away. In the YouTuber lecture today, Ali said something that struck me of, ideally in a business, you are only spending time on vision and everything else is handled by systems or people. And that's sitting very well with me, of even in this utopia where I have nanobots that I can just tell the nanobots, okay, this is what I want done with my car. And, maybe I'm using GPT-9 that can intelligently write in research articles. I think there's still value and fun for me in being able to set the direction of the ship, that ultimately I'm still the person who is deciding what good is. Maybe that's the only thing that automation will never take from us is, as humans, we get to define what we want to be more efficient at, what the goal is that we're working towards, and we can keep building tools and systems that'll be able to replace our work and even our thought. But maybe it's the defining of what direction to go in that we'll continue having. Yeah.
I used to say that I had no interest in reading a book if there was a movie version of it, because the movie is a more efficient way of getting to the same place. I would now say that's very flawed. I mean, I knew at the time I was saying it tongue in cheek. I knew to an extent that there was a flaw in that logic, but there is very much a flaw in that logic, which is that if the sole purpose of the activity is to acquire that stream of information, I guess it comes back to what you were saying last week about if you were able to communicate just by thinking and then triggering the corresponding neurons in someone else's brain, that it would be a more efficient way of conversing. And one thing I don't think we touched on in that, we talked about how that may not work in a practical sense, but there's also the question of, are you automating away the wrong things? Is the sole purpose of conversation in order to convey information? Or is there something about the act of sitting around and having a conversation that is enjoyable or whatever else in its own right?
I think tying that together, I would say something like the value if you decide that you want to be optimizing for more conversations, that's a thing that you enjoy, okay, well, then you can set the direction of your automation to be, let me try to do that as much as possible. And maybe if your goal is to be more mindful and present in the moment, okay, maybe you set the direction of your efficiency to how can I get as much of this time as possible.
Yeah.
I think that still fits within this framework of the ultimate goal is to live your life in a way that you're setting your direction of what you want getting done and maximizing the output of that and maximizing the amount of time that you're spending in the way that you want to be spending it.
I think everything that I'm suggesting here about there being value in the means, not just, in the journey of doing something, not just in the outcome of it, am I implicitly saying that there is no? I'm just trying to think, regardless of what you set as your ultimate, okay, this is my goal, and therefore I'm going to get rid of anything that doesn't contribute to that. Oh yeah, I'm not sure I follow what you're saying, that it's maybe not understand. Maybe what is it that you're suggesting as kind of, you touched on, if you, depending on what your goal is, will dictate whether it's something that's worth automating away or delegating.
I'm not sure I understand
the question. Where I'm trying to kind of, regardless of what your kind of business goal is, mm-hmm. I think we're possibly talking about a separate question aside from those surface level goals. It's a separate question of are you optimizing for efficiency or for presence, in a sense?
Could you not set your goal of efficiency to be optimizing presence? What if your goal was, I would like to be present as much as possible, and I have a EEG tracker that's tracking the number of seconds in a day that I'm feeling present, and then you efficiently optimize being as present as possible.
Okay. You still need the surface level goals as well. Otherwise, like we talked about before, you would just go and live in a ditch or go and you would do nothing. I wouldn't take it so far as to say there is no point in doing anything, in setting surface level goals, because you can, synthesize happiness regardless. That's, I don't see truth in that, but yeah, I don't know where this question goes.
I kind of like it. I need to chew on this more. But I feel like I'm starting to piece together a semblance of what it might look like to have a goal in this game of life, and like what the idea of living stoically and having I should have looked at their phrase, perfectly morally or fantastically moral or something. I'm starting to put my fingers on what that actually looks like. I'd love to dive into the bigger topic that I was branching off of earlier. You said the phrase, as soon as a task needs creativity, vision, or novel solutions, you might do better with a person than a robot. I'm curious what implication that has in the world, in the future of work, because I think most jobs that people are doing right now can be defined without any sort of creativity or vision. Think about truck drivers or drivers of any kind. I think in the US comprise something like 30% of the economy. If you take into account like bus drivers and people who pilot ships and plane captains. Driving, if you have a tight enough system, if you don't, if you're a pilot and you're acting creatively, like something has gone terribly wrong.
I mean, that's been no secret for a long time. The pilot is there for emergency situations.
Yes.
Where you do need not necessarily creativity, but it is potential. I mean, depending on how you define the words, maybe creativity is the right word. You need the pilot is not there for the plane, and the pilot still does takeoff and landing, but I don't know. More recently, I'm not sure that's even necessary. I think planes can do it. I forget the exact reasons why the pilot still does it. Otherwise, I don't know.
And certainly, I think as the system improves, we used to have people who directed traffic manually, and we used to have people who operated elevators manually. And by improving those systems, by making better automation, it would be farcical to have people operating those, because and that's
happened for a very, very long time. The difference that we're potentially approaching here is, like you say, there are a hell of a lot of drivers. I read an article many years ago about that concept where it was arguing that driving is, I think they said that driving is the most common job in the majority of US states. And that if you wipe all of those out overnight, not to mention the knock-on industries, the serving industries, like, every restaurant in the middle of a highway, like everything that serves the drivers, then yes, we've always had a process whereby something gets automated, but new jobs are created off the back of it. We might be heading for a situation where far more jobs are got rid of than new jobs are created. And it has very interesting implications. There's a story that I think you will like a lot that I will have to dig out for you, but it essentially follows that thought process. And it touches on the fact that kind of things, vision and to an extent dexterity. That was the other one I thought of when you talked about your brother-in-law with the car. But vision, dexterity, creativity. It was talking about how kind of vision is one of the biggest barriers right now, and that what this story envisaged happening is that before people assume that it's the lower levels that get automated away first. It's the burger flipper. And actually, those people, the thing that will keep them in jobs for longer is the fact that computers don't do vision yet. And the level that gets automated away first is the level one above that makes all the decisions for those people. It's a managerial level. And this story talks through a potential situation where you end up basically with the people in the burger chain keeping their jobs, but just wearing a headset that tells them exactly what to do at all times. And they just become the eyes and hands for the automated system. Which is an interesting idea. And then it plays it through further and further into two possible outcomes, like of where this ends up. Because you end up, I don't need to ruin the story for you, but you can end up with very different visions of society in terms of what happens when you have more people than jobs. There are very different ways that society can end up looking.
I would love to explore that more, because it seems inevitable to me that I like the articulation that computers take out the middle class before they take out the bottom, because flipping a burger is actually a very complicated thing to do in managing that workflow. But for the person telling the burger flipper what orders to make, that's an automated system. I'm reminded of a quote by Mark, I think it's Andreessen, one of the founders of Netscape. Mm-hmm. He said, in the future, there will be two types of people who tell computers what to do and people who are told by computers what to do. which
Right.
sort of fits beautifully in this of, okay, yes, we're taking out the middle class. I'm curious about what the future might look like, because it seems inevitable to me right now that the only people left with any sort of meaningful work will be people with creativity and vision. And that right now feels like such a slim segment of the population, at least in the working life. Although I suppose if I was looking at this more optimistically, I might say, well, everyone has creativity and vision. Most of them just aren't in places that are easy to or straightforward to get an economic output from that's enough output that they could support themselves. And so if we free people up from the menial jobs they had, telling burger flippers, oh, hey, we got a McRib order and you gotta make that. Okay, well now maybe we've freed them to be able to start a YouTube channel on knitting, and that's their outlet for creativity and vision that they want to be doing.
And again, the story explores those ideas as well, of if you tell someone they don't need to work anymore, or they don't need to work as much anymore, what will they do? Would people just Netflix, or will you see a hell of a lot more creativity, like you touched on there? And I think the other place that goes is the question of education, where I think to a large extent, I might be oversimplifying slightly, but I would essentially describe school as a creation killing project. So, in a sense, we are. I think in large part the education system is built to create the exact people that we have just discussed are the people that will be needed the least. Which, if you look at, and again, I'm quoting here from one or two TED Talks and so on, I haven't done vast amounts of research, but my limited knowledge of it would say that if you look at the history of the education system, it was essentially built to create compliant workers for the factories. It was essentially created by the people who had the factories originally. And that is like we've said, that is the last thing that we're going to need in the future. That is the most automatable part of society.
That's a powerful idea. Okay, so that makes me very hopeful that the transition period is going to be painful. We have a bunch of people who are trained to be cogs in machines, spit out by a system that needed a bunch of those people. There was a time in history where right now I think you could argue, where we needed standardized people that we could drop in, and okay, we need accountants. Let's standardize accountants. They got to know how to read and write and do math. And here you go. That accountant died. All right, here's a new accountant. You can slot right in there. What might an education system look like where instead of optimizing for standardization, we were instead optimizing for creativity and vision? What would a school look like in a world where anything could be automated and the only real problem is deciding to pick a direction? That's an exciting thought. That'd be a fun world.
Yeah, and like you say, if there is a transition toward that, the problem is, like, if you were going to, from a blank slate, if you were going to take a blank slate and look at what jobs today are needed and which ones are not, you would end up designing a world that's vastly different than what we have. A lot of the jobs that exist now exist because they existed before, and for no other reason. But you would also, if you were to design that from scratch, then you would, for example, you presumably wouldn't put in a 40-hour work week, let's say. But in transitioning from what we have now, I'm not sure there's a clear path to getting to the utopian ideal that you might design from scratch.
Repeat that last thought.
I'm not sure that in practice that transitioning from what we have now and just letting what we have now evolve over time as less jobs are needed, I'm not sure you'll end up at the same place that you would end up at if you from scratch took out a piece of paper and designed what an ideal society could look like at that point.
Oh, certainly. But it would be impossible to design a perfect society from scratch. I think we would take so much for granted.
This is one of the things that story goes into. It essentially describes two parallel possibilities. One is kind of, if you rethink this from scratch, here is this very quite amazing world that you could end up with. And one, I suspect, and one is kind of a very negative one, where it takes into account things, aspects of the society we have today, where you would kind of say, okay, well, those people are not able to work. There's no job for them. And so they'll go on benefits and we'll maybe just ship them away to, you end up with so many of them that you kind of say, okay, we don't have enough council housing, and therefore we're going to build new kind of super council housing, essentially jails, where those people will go. You can kind of see, and you can end up with a world where you say these people are not able to work, and therefore we are going to essentially punish them, and they're going to have a very miserable life. Or you can say, let's rethink this from scratch and actually create quite an amazing world. So, you can go either direction. When the context or the inputs change, you have an opportunity to start to go back to the drawing board and decide what you want the output to be, or you transition gradually from something inferior and you may stay with something inferior.
Tying this back to our discussion about how you automated your accounting, I think the danger of starting with a brand new system is that you don't understand the process well enough to design everything from scratch. There may very well be parts of the existing system that you're completely ignoring and taking for granted, that in designing your new system you just forget about, and then the whole thing explodes. So I think progressively improving is the only way to do it. Taking the existing system and just sort of bolting on a piece at a time of, okay, it's just like the old system, but this is this part where we have the input going here, and then it's this complicated series of steps, and then the output. Oh, I made this thing where it just goes straight from input to output. The
whole world is held up very delicately. It's just, it's a vast web of interconnected things. Like, it's just this massive house of cards, and like you say, you have to change things very gradually.
I think that's the only way to do it.
But I don't know necessarily what the optimal speed to make change like that is. I suspect. Yeah, I mean, it's very easy to say governments move too slowly, but equally there are reasons for the speed that they move at. Are those reasons valid? I have no idea.
I'm curious in particular.
What it comes back to is, at the end of the day, it's all people. The government doesn't decide anything. It's people. And those people, regardless of what might be the best decision for a country or for a government, there's what's going to be the best decision for that individual in terms of their own personal goals and pleasing their boss. And, no one got fired hiring IBM or using Java or so that is another place that designing from scratch differs from gradual transition.
It's even worse than people acting in their own individual best interest, because people don't act in their best interest. To do that, you would need perfect ability to simulate the future. People act on feelings. People act on who more charismatically presented their option. That's the option I'm going to go with. That's a very flawed system. And that's what we have. And it works, sort of. So any sort of change, I think, would need to look like very delicately making incremental improvements. I'm particularly interested in what the transition is going to look like of this next major economic shift of we're sort of in the middle of drivers being automated and in the middle of accountants and the people who tell McDonald's workers what the orders are of being automated. I don't know what happens to those people who were trained in a system of churning out factory workers who have had their creativity very successfully killed so that they could be very effective cogs in machines. I don't know what we do with them. I don't know what they do other than, going out into the streets and protesting things that they're angry about that came up on their TikTok. I see that as potentially a huge problem, and it's a problem that will last for a generation. So it'll be solved eventually, but I don't know how you make that a smooth transition. Do we have another concept of school that's like creativity school of here's how you set your own vision and come up with your own things? And okay, yes, you were a truck driver for 20 years, but now you need to learn how to start a YouTube channel. I don't know what that looks like.
I think on the premise that school kills all the natural creativity, I think we're talking more about what you end up creating something that might be described more as unlearning, which is a concept that is starting to, there are unschools, and this unlearning concept is a thing. And I think it will, if the world does start going in that direction, then those kind of systems may be able to break through. The idea that you explore what you're interested in. It's not to, we're not suggesting that at that point you don't need to know maths, for example. It may still be useful for quite some time, especially as someone might need to, in the long term, the robots will make the robots. But in the short term, there should be someone who knows how to make the robots to begin with. And I think a lot of there's a couple of things with education. One is that it's trying to create people it's trying to create cogs. But then expanding from that, you end up with the idea of we need a way to measure the cogs. And then you get standardization, and you get and a lot of so a further reason that you don't have so much creativity in school is that you need everybody to be able to pass the exam or fail the exam. You need everybody to be measurable on the exam. Mm-hmm. If you decided that wasn't as important, then interesting things might be able to happen. Equally, to take that full circle, given that everything is so standardized in school at the moment. Okay, so here's an interesting. So everything is standardized, and therefore the concept of having every teacher in the country or the world coming up with, let's say the country, because country is where the standardization happens, typically. So you've got every teacher in every school is coming up with their own lesson plans and then teaching those lessons. But it's all standardized. So you might argue that you should get rid of the teachers. You keep the best teachers, mm-hmm. and they teach the whole country. And then at that point, you probably just need a couple of supervisors to sit with the children and make sure they don't, eat each other.
As children are wont to do.
So, but they wouldn't need to have teaching qualifications, because the teaching would be done online by the super teachers. Or there's the opposite situation where you say, let's get rid of all the standardization. The kids can just be creative, One reason you can't do that is because you don't have enough teachers. But if we're saying that there won't be as many jobs, then could you end up with a situation where you say you have lots of adults employed to work with the children and harbour their creativity, nurture their creativity? Or maybe that should be the parents. And you go back to what we had before the standard with the formal education system, which was where you learned the skills of your father, typically, and you went into his profession. Lots of possibilities. I think like I said, there is this unschooling concept, which is essentially, let's still equip children with the skills like the reading and writing and whatever else, but they can get there by exploring things they're interested in, rather than everyone being on a very fixed curriculum. Now that's difficult to do if you have like one teacher, 30 children, and all of them need to end up at the exam. It's very difficult to then say, okay, I'm going to come up with the lesson plan to do with superheroes for the kid that likes superheroes, but I'm going to rebuild the entire lesson plan in a different thing for someone else. Whereas if you're just letting the kids find their own way and you're just supporting that, and there's enough people to do that, I don't know.
I'm very hopeful about that idea. I like it a lot. And we can start by... Oh, I'm not going to call them re-education camps. We can start by having a secondary level of education for fostering creativity, which I think looks like a lot of things that we have right now. Of, take an online class in writing, if that's a thing you enjoy, and then we can pivot those things into a new system of education that is teaching some standards of, okay, it's probably important to learn maths. Probably not important to know calculus. I know of everyone I've ever gone to school with, which is, in the thousands of people, I think I know maybe 10 who still use calculus in their jobs. 11. And I think everyone, it's computer science. Do you use calculus? What do you use calculus for?
Yeah, not daily, but I've used it a lot since leaving school.
Can you recall an instance of it? The idea of like derivatives and integrals has been academically interesting to me, but I can't think of a problem that I've solved with them in my adult life.
I have to get back to you, but it has come up. Trigonometry is one that comes up a lot with computer, that can come up a lot with the computer scientists, yes. and whereas everyone else is like, why did I ever learn that?
Yes, and trigonometry I think would also be useful if you're ever building anything. Sure, so I don't know, maybe throw trig in there for people who want to know it. Point being, have a stripped down version of the essentials of, okay, you need to learn how to read and write, but you probably don't need to know how to academically analyze literature. So let's use that time that we've freed up, cutting out calculus and cutting out reading books that you're not interested in, and then pretending to write a paper on what your thoughts are on it. We can now channel that into fostering what you're actually interested in. And if that is, if that's playing Minecraft, great. We'll have an adult there and a peer support network that's going to foster your creativity to the nth degree on playing Minecraft. The game is just, what are you enthusiastic and interested in? Go. Here, everything you need, we can get it. And I think that's how you would create.
Yeah. One thing that gets rid of that might still be necessary is a certain amount of cultivating the ability to work on something that isn't immediately gratifying in the short term. That I think probably is an important skill that the school. I don't know if school helps with that well now, but it might to an extent. That self-discipline of. Well, I guess it doesn't nurture self-discipline. It nurtures discipline with a threat of external punishment. But I don't know psychologically whether that does help people to set their own, to have their own self-discipline and work on something that might only have a later payoff, which I think would be still important.
I think it doesn't nurture discipline as much as compliance. I think if you're teaching following things that you're passionate in. Okay, you love Minecraft and you love this experience of being in a really well-designed Minecraft world. Great, go forward and build a Minecraft world. If I didn't want to do that, oh my gosh, that would be just the most mind-numbing, like terrible task for me to do. But if you're pursuing that in the interest of genuine enjoyment and internal motivation of you just love Minecraft so much that you will push through any obstacle to be able to get there, well, I think that's meaning. I think that's how you get purpose in life. You've decided what you want your trade-offs to be able to get the goal that you want. And you've practiced now seeing like, okay, there's this thing that I really want. And I've gone through a process of, it was really difficult and I felt really frustrated, but at the end of it, like I got the thing, or at least I got closer to it. I think that's so much more valuable than, teaching kids to do a homework assignment that they're not interested in at all and just sort of grinding it out and pushing out something that they hate and that is terrible and that they wanted no interest in the process.
You're suggesting that the creative things that someone might choose for themselves within them are inevitably going to have things that are not immediately gratifying, and so you'll learn to work through those in order to get to the thing you actually want.
Yeah, I think so.
Cool, awesome. We've fixed the world.
Good. Just
I'll write to the White House. I don't know why I chose the White House. If I'm gonna
probably not the most effective.
That's not where my leader is. And if I was going to pick the leader of the world, that's presumably China more than America. I don't know.
That would be especially ineffective at this state in history. Also, maybe wait a few months if you're going to address the White House, or actually less than a month, I think.
All right, I'll wait to fix the world.
Okay,
but that's on you. This period of time between now and next month when the world is not fixed, yes. That's on you.
Fair.
Yeah,
I accept culpability. Neat. That's all I got. We could end it here. We could keep chatting. What would you like to do?
Myers-Briggs.
Yes.
That was something I wanted to bring up briefly. I'm just blown away by it. Which I like even more, given that some people think it's absolute crap. There's some real hatred for it online. It's quite interesting. But I find it fascinating. It just intuits. It makes a lot of sense to me. And every time you read an example of what that might mean for your personality, you're like, this is describing me. Fascinating.
Remind me what's your type?
ENTP. Which sounds similar to yours, but actually has nothing in common with it.
E versus J is perceiving versus judging. Is that right?
Yes, but in practice, so this is what I've been learning about is picking apart how Myers-Briggs actually works. Because given my personality, I can't just accept at surface value that, everyone has a type. I want to understand the mechanics of it.
Yep.
So those letters are just a shorthand that describes what your four cognitive functions are and in which order.
It's E versus I, which is introverted versus extroverted.
Yeah.
I don't remember N. What was N?
N versus S. But these aren't your cognitive functions. You can use these to construct your cognitive functions. These are a definition. These are a blueprint, if you like, for what your cognitive functions are. Those are not the cognitive functions.
Okay.
The cognitive functions are things like, they are. They're the possibilities for the middle letters, so N, S, T, and F, and each one can be either extroverted or introverted, right? So the cognitive functions are things like, so in your case, you're an ENTJ,
mm-hmm.
Right? So what that means, ENTJ is a shorthand for saying that your stack from dominant to least, your stack of functions is your stack is TE, as in extroverted thinking, then introverted intuition, then extroverted sensing, and then introverted feeling. And it's that stack that describes how you are much better than the phrase ENTJ does.
I have never heard that dimension of Myers-Briggs before. I am not following you.
Yeah.
What is the stack?
So as the stack is essentially attributes about you. So the ENTJ in itself, what that tells you, the E just tells you that the main thing that you do it outwards more than inwards. Your stack is essentially, here are the 4 attributes about you in order of how dominant they are. Okay. And the E in ENTJ is saying, the thing that you have in position number 1 in your stack of 4 things, your most dominant thing is extroverted.
Okay.
But what is that thing? It could be extroverted thinking, extroverted feeling, extroverted intuition, or extroverted sensing. In your case, it's extroverted thinking. The reason I know that is that the T in your... Is there... I want to whiteboard this. I want a pen. Okay. And you are an ENTJ. The N and the T means that you've got N, meaning intuition, somewhere at the top of your stack. I'm going to put an N there. And you've got T somewhere at the top of your stack. That's what those 2 letters are saying.
Okay.
Is that your N and your T are going to be at the top of your stack, whereas your S and your F are going to be in the lower positions in your stack.
Okay.
The E says that the thing at the top of your stack is going to be extroverted, and then it alternates. So your second thing is going to be introverted.
Why does introversion and extroversion alternate? That doesn't quite make sense.
It just does, and this is why Myers-Briggs blows my mind.
Okay.
Because whatever your thing at the top is, if your dominant thing is extroverted, your secondary thing will always happen introverted.
Interesting.
And I'll describe what those mean. It's because it's not as simple as to how you might expect an introvert or an extrovert to be. To give you a simple example, if someone has extroverted sensing, it means that they take in information primarily, like as their top one. It means they primarily take in information using their senses, their 5 senses. If someone has introverted sensing, then they're much more about feeling what's going on inside their body.
Okay.
So it doesn't strictly mean extra, like it's not necessarily a loud person, a quiet person.
Okay.
Anyway, so far we know that your N and your T are going to be in the top 2, but we don't know in which order.
Right.
Your extroverted comes first. That's what the E is telling us.
Mm-hmm.
The J is to specify the order of these things. So what the J is saying, J is judging,
mm-hmm.
which simply means that this guy for you
mm-hmm.
is the one that you do outwards. That's your extroverted function.
Pause.
That's what J means.
If I was ENFJ, would that mean that my first thing in the top of my stack is extroverted feeling?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So J tells you which one of these middle letters J tells you that this one of your middle letters is the one that you do in an extroverted way.
Okay.
And since we've established that your extroversion comes in position number 1, that means that your thinking comes in position number 1.
Yep.
And from there, you then fill in the rest. So the N goes there, and then it's always the opposite. So if your T is at the top, then your F is right down the bottom. And your N is here, so your S is here.
So you said
and that gives you a function stack. And that's what describes your personality.
You said I was
letters themselves.
Extroverted thinking, introverted intuition, extroverted sensing, introverted feeling.
Yeah.
Extroverted thinking. That resonates with me. Yeah, I feel like I do that. Introverted intuition. I feel like intuition is intrinsically introverted. How might one have extroverted intuition?
Okay. So it's subtle. The difference between introverted and extroverted intuition, I believe, is that extroverted intuition tends to go more broad, whereas introverted intuition goes deep on a topic. So it's not so much about outer and inner as much as introverted intuition is just more likely to kind of go deep on wanting to understand a certain topic very well, I recently saw quite a good. Here we go. If you wanted to concisely summarize it, extroverted intuition is ingenuity. Introverted intuition is insight. So extroverted intuition is kind of, here are a million things, like here are some things, and you find all the connections between them, and you invent something new based on what you can see, maybe without realizing how you're doing it, but you see these ways to connect a lot of things together and create new things. And introverted intuition is more about getting very deep insight, being able to understand the individual thing incredibly well without even necessarily knowing how you're doing it.
Okay. Can I walk through this with you and see if I understand this process? What this is a stack? I've never heard of this for Myers-Briggs.
Yes, function stack.
Function stack.
And so you'll always end up with a stack that has 4 things where 2 of them are extroverted, 2 are introverted. You have a T, an N, an S, and an F in them somewhere.
Okay, so you are ENTP. So the first thing we do is we're going to alternate our stack of 4, starting with whatever the first letter is, which means you're going to be introverted, or you're going to be extroverted, introverted, extroverted, introverted.
Yeah.
The next thing we do is look at that last letter for if it's a P or a J. If it's a J, then we go out of order for the 2 middle letters. And if it's a P, then we go in order. So for you, your top one now is extroverted intuition, and your second one is introverted thinking.
Yeah.
And now for the last 2.
Now remember, that all happens in reverse if the first letter was I. So J doesn't tell you. Okay. I think what you said is right. Yeah. The J doesn't tell you which thing to put up top necessarily. It tells you which thing to put next to the E.
Yes.
So yes. So I am NE in my top and then TI in my second.
Okay. Hold on. Introverted thinking on the second level of your stack. Is that what you just said?
Introverted thinking in the second position, yeah.
Yes. Okay, so now for number 3, I think we do sensing. So you're extroverted sensing. And then
No. If you're thinking and feeling, you have to be. It's a mirror image after that. So if you've got T up top, then your F is down bottom.
Okay. So you're
Similarly, F up top is T down bottom.
so now you're
T and
extroverted.
F are always going to be opposite each other, and N and S are always going to be opposite each other wherever
Got
they
it.
are.
Okay, so number 3 for you is extroverted feeling, and number 4 is introverted judging. Is that right?
Introverted sensing.
Introverted.
S is the last letter to put it. J and P don't appear anywhere in the stack. J and P just tell you what order other things are going.
Well, hold on. Introverted feeling. Oh, you've lost me. I don't know why it's introverted sensing.
It's introverted because we alternate E-I.
Right. Why is it sensing?
And it's sensing because that's the only letter that's left. The 4 letters that were put for the 4 capital letters to insert into this thing
Right.
are a T and an F and an N and an S.
Oh, yep. Sensing is the opposite of intuition. Okay, I'm with it. I understand.
Sensing is the opposite of intuition. It's the other possible
And we're mirroring
letter
it.
for the set.
We had intuition at the top, so we'll do a mirror, so it's sensing at the bottom. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I am skeptical of the utility of this system. It is so nice, and I love the pattern of it, and I love the system of mirroring and having rules for doing it. I'm imagining like the program that I would write. You type in your Myers-Briggs sign, and then I tell you what your stack is. And I feel like
that it can define anyone in this way.
Go ahead. Say it again.
You're skeptical that it can define somebody accurately.
I see the utility of the Myers-Briggs system. Of I think I have seen people who are more inclined to be on one side or the other of the introverted versus extroverted spectrum, and people who are more guided in their decisions by thinking or feeling. I recognize that there are population differences, and there's no perfect personality test where I think that the perfect personality test would be one where N was equal to the number of people that there were for the number of buckets, and this is only 16. So there's going to be some clustering and chunking and people sort of on the border of things. So I see the utility of the Myers-Briggs system, and I'm skeptical of the function stack framework being useful, because in trying to flip these, what I'm looking for is I'm trying to convince myself that this is true, not only by saying, okay, yes, extroverted thinking, that I identify with that, but by flipping it and saying, like, do I not agree that I'm introverted thinking? Or for introverted intuition, you said the difference between introverted versus extroverted intuition was, do you dive deep on understanding a topic versus going broad and finding connections between them? I identify with both of those things. I think I would have a higher propensity to agree that one of them was accurately defining me if you told me, oh, we gave you this personality test and this is the type that defines you. And then,
one thing that's worth doing is looking at they interact with one another, and so the thing to do is to read a description of that personality type that's broken down into, here are your 4 functions, and here is how they interplay with one another, and therefore here is a theory about how you are, and see whether that matches or doesn't.
Okay, I'm curious about that. Where would I go to read that?
You could try this one. Oh, so this is the other interesting thing about them, is that they essentially develop in order during your life, as in whatever you have in number 3 typically matures around age 30.
Oh, that's fun.
When you
Yeah,
talk
phase
about
3.
somebody becoming more mature, it's typically that their third thing in their stack is developing,
Hmm.
and then their fourth.
This says, if all goes well and they're fortunate enough to enter stage 3, yikes. ENTJs become increasingly aware of the insidious ways their inferior FI. What does that mean? What is FI? Feeling intuition.
Introverted feeling, the thing that you have in your fourth position.
Oh, spooky. Okay, yeah. As they become more aware of their inferior and learn to function more healthily as ENTJs, they experience greater balance between their. Okay, TE would be extroverted thinking, and FI is introverted feeling. Okay.
Yeah.
As well as an increasing sense of peace and wholeness. Okay, so yes, definitely. And also, I would want to read one of these for a different personality type that I disagreed with. Like, let me change it to yours. If I change this to ENTP. ENTP profile did not work.
Take out profile. I think it's just ENTP.
Okay.
I just searched it.
Yep, there we go. Phase 2, phase 3. If fortunate enough to enter stage 3, ENTPs become increasingly aware of the insidious ways of their inferior. It's SI, which is introverted sensing.
Yeah.
As they become more aware of their inferior and learn to function more authentically as ENTPs, they experience greater balance between their extroverted intuition and introverted sensing. They discover that integrating their introverted sensing happens naturally and indirectly as they go about authentically using their extroverted intuition and introverted thinking. As they cultivate conditions that support their natural strengths, they come to experience a heightened sense of peace, wholeness, and satisfaction. I don't know that I would disagree with that if I was reading it as a description of me. Experiencing a greater balance between my extroverted
that sounded vague to me. But equally, you would expect there to be something similar in you because you also have your intuition in the top half and your sensing in the bottom half. If you read this about somebody who has sensing up top and intuition down the bottom, I would expect it to be quite different than you or I.
What's the most different personality I could get for myself if I just flip all of them?
You'd want some. You'd want something with F and S in the top half. So, anything with S and F will probably should be quite different to you.
If I do ISFP, it's a different type of site. Could I go through a little experiment with you?
Yeah.
So based on you being ENTP, there's another source of a description, and I'm gonna read you the description and then ask you how closely you feel like it applies to you. You believe that while everyone should look out for themselves, you are willing to help others when they have difficulties. You obtain great satisfaction from doing small kindnesses, even when your action may not be recognized by others. Though you are a person who tends to be forgiving of others' faults, and you try to trust them, once an acquaintance has proved to be dishonest or unworthy of your confidence, you watch them carefully. If you are not already in or intending to enter a human services career, you certainly should move in that direction. You would be very successful in such a profession. While at times you have serious doubts as to whether you have made the right decision or done the right thing, you are disciplined and controlled on the outside. You tend to be worrisome and insecure on the inside. Your basic intuitions usually prove right, and you are an excellent judge of character. Occasionally, your aspirations tend to be pretty unrealistic. At times, you can be extroverted, affable, sociable, while at other times you are introverted, weary, and reserved. For reasons that are not clear to you, you have found it unwise to be too frank in revealing yourself to others. You pride yourself on being an independent thinker and do not accept others' opinions without satisfactory proof. You prefer a certain amount of change and variety in your life and become dissatisfied when hemmed in by restrictions and limitations. Your personal sexual adjustment has presented some problems for you. While you have been personally weak While you have some personality weaknesses, you are generally able to compensate for them. You have a great deal of unused capacity, which you have not turned to your advantage. You have a tendency to be critical of yourself and have a strong need for other people to like you and for them to admire you. At this present date, you have had to recover from a disappointment, and you have determined to overcome it. You can expect a new person to enter your life, a person who may have come to your attention during the past 12 to 14 days. Travel is clearly showing in your plans. And that's the end. Health circumstances can be important for you. How do you feel about that description of you?
I don't think that was the NTP.
You don't think that was the NTP. Why don't you think that?
Because my intuition told me.
That's fair. So that is a fake horoscope from a magician named the Amazing Randy, and the way that he conducted a sort of experiment is he got a room of 30 people together and had them fill out this long questionnaire that involved these were all people who I think. Well, he was framing it in terms of that this is an astrological star chart that we're going to determine this thing based on the time that you were born, and asked all sorts of questions about like exactly where on the planet were you born and what time and all these things that seemingly shouldn't have a basis on what your personality actually is. And so in the room, he gave them all the next day personalized horoscopes based on the questionnaire that they had done. And they all had their envelope and they all sat there reading it. And he said, who in here thinks that this was like 90% accurate? Everyone in the room raises their hands. And he asked one of them to read it out loud, and they start reading it. And it's the passage that I just read to you. And everyone starts laughing. And the person who's reading is like, why are they laughing? And they're laughing because everyone got the exact same description. And that fascinates me because I think what that means is, for me at least, I'm susceptible to hearing things about myself that are merely describing the internal state of all humans, as opposed to things that are
which is where the comparisons with horoscopes come in.
Right.
Because that's what's said about them. They kind of made them vague enough that they kind of apply to everyone or could do.
Right.
Yeah.
All of that to say, I feel like I'm being mean. My motivation in trying to be hypercritical of things in the realm of personality tests is that I feel very frustrated at my own susceptibility to these sorts of things. So I think I've built up maybe an unhealthy negative response to them. I'm especially critical of things in the personality testing space, and also this is very interesting, and I feel a little bit bad for being critical of the cool new thing that you brought up. But I was the reason I asked what your type was that I would have, I think I would have been able to piece it together more or less. I probably couldn't have told you the last letter because it's vague how that interplays, but the fact that we enjoy having these kinds of conversations basically means you're an NT. Like your middle letters are N and T. The N essentially meaning the intuition is basically you're more interested in the meaning behind things and how things work than you are in the surface level, the things themselves. And then that your thinking is above your feeling. So yeah, from that point of view, I think there is a definite difference. I see that.
And I think about 3/4 of the population are S rather than N, for example, which definitely tallies with me. The majority, The majority of people want conversations more surface level than I would like to have for a long period of time.
Yes. That tracks.
If people are just talking about what already is, it's funny because I talked about, I like the present moment isness thing, but that could be my S developing later on. I definitely did not appreciate that stuff when I was younger. But yeah, if someone is all just about what's already going on and they're not interested in the possibilities and how things connect together and how things work, then stimulating conversation doesn't last for that long between me and them.
I'm reminded of one of David Foster Wallace's essays. He's talking about, it's an essay about TV, I think. And he's making an argument that TV is just the worst thing that has happened to society because it's shifting everyone from having actual conversations and actually thinking to having the majority of their experience just be this voyeuristic, they are watching something unfold on the TV. And then their conversations are reduced to the level of, did you just see what I just saw? And that's the sort of conversation that I feel like the 75% of the population that's just sensing is having. And since he said that phrase is stuck in my head. Did you just see what I just saw? Because now I hear that everywhere when at any kind of sporting event or when watching a movie or like, that's the conversations that people are having. And there's some subtleties in like, oh, well, I saw something slightly different, but there's no intelligence behind it. It's just noticing things that happen. And then I suppose like taking an automatic stance on whether that thing is good or bad. And then figuring out who aligns with you and tribalistically, oh, these are the people who think the thing that just happened is good. It's depressing. And I suppose it's just part of the product of churning people out in a factory machine. That's all they're.
But it's depressing for you. It's possible that those people find it not depressing at all, and they find the whole, people talking about possibilities and intuiting. They find that very strange.
Yeah,
not desirable.
Yeah. And that's where personality difference comes in. I don't know that you could make a pejorative claim on if either of those methods was better or worse. I think they're each better or worse in different environments. So yeah, they're for the 75% of the population, they're probably looking at a conversation like this, like, oh my God, that is so boring. They're just talking for an hour and a half. Yeah.
They're living in a fantasy world. Yeah. They've not said anything about the actual world.
Yes. Yeah.
They've not even asked if they saw the same TV show.
How do these people even know if they like each other? Oh, my one of my exes, we had this joke when we were watching Baby Driver. Have you seen Baby Driver, the film? Great movie. Excellent timing. There's the script of it we took issue with. There's a scene in the movie where they're illustrating that the Baby Driver and his love interest have fallen in love. And I think they're in a diner and the Baby Driver's like listening on his headphones because he has tinnitus. And then the waitress comes over and she's like, oh, what are you listening to? And she puts the earphones on and oh my gosh, she likes the music. And so my partner at the time and I were joking like, oh my God, I'm in love with you. We have the same taste in music. And then later on in the film, like that is actually the crux of why they fall in love with each other. There's the scene that we were just cracking up on where the Baby Driver's boss decides to sacrifice himself for this young couple. And he says the line, I was in love once too. And it just felt so corny and cheesy to us of like, because you like the same music, like what a surface level, outrageous, superficial reason to get in a romantic relationship with someone. And I've come to understand that much better of like, I think it's an indication, especially for people who I imagine are feeling overthinking. Having someone who has the same taste in music as you is an indication that you feel the same feelings as they do. And I think that's something that is maybe more difficult and not as intuitive for me to connect with. But I'm getting the sense that that actually is very valuable information for people. Of if we like the same artists, maybe that means we like feeling the same feelings, and we have a similar emotional landscape, and that's going to allow us to connect more. And I'm intellectualizing this and expressing it in words, which, like, of course, I don't think they would express that to themselves in the same way, but that's the process that I feel like is going on.
Yeah, I hear that. I think there's another thing as well, which is if we say that music and art and so on are I'm borrowing this from, I'm going to go spiritual on you again. This is an Eckhart Tolle kind of idea that if music and art and so on are good at helping us connect with something deeper, that true music and art kind of quiets our mind and our preconceptions and our judgments and just lets us get back to kind of our real self, coupled with the idea that that love is essentially just that same feeling of being deeply connected with yourself and all that is. And so, and sort of the idea that the love that you have, like if there is a person that you love, that is exactly the same love as the love you might have for nature, or really for any random person. It's just that certain people are better at reflecting your love back than others are. So rather than it being this arbitrary construct of this individual and that individual, like this individual happens to love that individual and vice versa, that it's actually more, there is just that the world is just kind of full of love. You have and it is just to what degree another person is able to make you feel your own love, if you like. If that makes sense. If it doesn't, then read the book.
Which book is this by Eckhart Tolle?
Power of Now.
Power of Now. Oh, yep, I already have it on my list.
To put it in terms of what we were saying before, we're talking about kind of that feeling that you might get from doing dangerous sport, that intensely alive, present feeling. And you might get the same thing when you suddenly see a very breathtaking natural sight. Mm-hmm. You get that similar feeling for a second, sort of arguing that all of those feelings are not created by the external situation. They are, they were always there. The external situation just helped your mind to shut up for a minute so that you could feel the underlying aliveness of the world. And so the argument is that love for another person is the same thing. It's not that person has been able to create that feeling in you. It's that person has helped you to feel that feeling in you that was always there in you already.
Oh, what a beautiful idea.
I mentioned that in terms of the music thing, is that it's also possible that the fact that the two people might hear the same music and it has the same impact on both of them of being able to help them feel that underlying thing at the same time for the same art.
I think you're saying just the couple in Baby Driver that has the same taste in music, both love that music, and Eckhart Tolle would say that the love that they feel for that music is the same sort of love that you would feel for a partner or for yourself. And so,
or that those two people are both, that music was able to shut up those two people's minds and make them feel something deeper at the same time. and therefore they were feeling love for each other. Where what you're really saying is they were both able to connect with their deepness at the same time, and that is what love is. Or it's just a cheesy movie with a mediocre script writer. It's either or.
That's a fun thought. I like that. The love that you get in the world is your own love reflected back at you. I'm reminded of a essay I was reading where the author was talking about his experience growing up with his parents. And he has this vivid memory of going down to the basement and seeing his two parents sitting on the couch, just in love with each other, just sort of sitting there talking. And he remembers this visceral feeling of running down the stairs and jumping between them and just feeling like he was absorbing their love and in this fantastic happy family. And I was struck by it in particular because that is so different from the antagonistic relationship between my two parents. I would love to create that sort of environment for a child. I feel like that'd be a much more nurturing environment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but that's interesting. That's something you can, in recognizing that, you've made a decision, I guess, or a realization of there were patterns which naturally you grow up thinking. I don't know at what point, like, something kind of has to happen for you to realize that your own upbringing wasn't normal and perfect, because you kind of assume to an extent that it is because it's the one you know. But in realizing that, you've made a decision not to play out the same script, I guess, that you would not be, that you don't think is ideal. Which seems like a great realization.
Yeah, it's very difficult to break negative patterns, but there's no other way to get out. It's difficult to break negative patterns, but that's the only way to get out of negative patterns.
Well, recognizing them is kind of the hardest bit, I think, in a sense.
Tying this back to the conversation from earlier, that's sort of the problem of how do you fix society? First you have to recognize that something is broken. There's a sub-optimization in the space. We're training way too many people to be drivers. That's not a thing that we're going to do more of. And then once we've identified, okay, this is the problem and this is the direction that we'd like to be moving it towards, and perhaps even constructing an idea of what the ideal looks like, if we could start over from scratch, then make incremental improvements from where you are to where you'd like to be, and don't overhaul the entire system because you're likely to break things. But you can be making incremental improvements of scripts that integrate with your accounting software. And then once you're confident enough in the entire system, then you can completely replace it. Or maybe completely replacing it just happens naturally after replacing a piece at a time.
Yeah. Yeah, eventually you end up with, well, that's also an interesting question. Like, if you incrementally replace every part of something, at what point does it stop being the old thing?
The ship of Theseus, yes.
Right. Shall we call it a day?
Let's call it a day. Same time next week.
Sure.
Cool.